first of all, a huge thank you for joining us. My name's Adrian Saunders. I'm Commercial Director for Ecclesiastical, responsible for our broker business, and really delighted that so many of you have chosen to join us this morning. This is the second in a series of 4 regulatory workshops. We delivered the first one last week. If you missed it, it's available, it's recorded, so you can go back after today and have a look at that one, which was very much an overview and a positioning for the 3 following workshops. This one, as I've said, being the second one. I'd like to welcome John King from RWA, who very much going to be delivering this session as he will do the next 2, which I very much hope that you'll be able to join us for as well. Just a few bits of housekeeping. So I guess we're a pretty big group. We've got up to over 114 of us now on the call, which is fantastic. So can I just ask that, partly just to sort of manage things, but also from a bandwidth point of view, if you could just go on mute and keep your cameras off, that would be really appreciated. That would really help us. You'll probably see it already on the screen, but we are recording these sessions, and so just so as you're aware of that, we're recording them. Fantastic content that's getting created here, and we want to make sure that people who aren't able to join have got the opportunity to join on demand and view them over sort of coming weeks and what have you. So mute, cameras off. We are definitely recording. I think the other key thing is about questions. So I'm sure by this stage, everybody's been using Teams. I don't need to point out where it all is, but up on that toolbar there's the little speech bubble. So if you have got questions as you go along, please post them. Don't save them up, but just post them as we go along. And then when John's got to the end of this morning's session, I will do my best to compare and manage those questions. We'll answer as many as we can at the end of the session. If they're a bit complex, or if we run out of time, then we can pick those up separately and manage those offline. See, I'm being super optimistic there that we're going to have lots of questions. So don't hold back in asking the questions. So I think that's at the end of my little intro. To which point I'll hand over to John to take us away with the session.
Can I have the next slide then, please, Jess? So good morning, everyone. Good to have so many of you here today. For those that don't know me, I'm John King. I was with the FSA, FCA for about 16 years. Most of that time was in general insurance supervision. And as well as being a consultant working with RWA, I'm also a non-executive director, A Plan Group, and an SMF chair of ITC, a principal firm for 400 ARs. So I think that enables me to see the situation from a number of different angles. And so I know what you're going through on these regulatory changes. I'm delighted to be working with Adrian and Ecclesiastical on this important topic this morning. Have the next slide, please, Jess. As Adrian said, this is the second of 4 webinars, and we'll be going into the product governance rules in more detail. The first webinar was an overview, and as Adrian said, is recorded and is available. But I'll start today just with a quick recap. So can I have the next slide, please, Jess? So we now have the pricing practices final rules. They were published in May. All 217 pages of them. But for what we're talking about today, the pricing practices is a bit of a misnomer, as the FCA sneaked product governance into this, and it's been the pricing of motor and home, the dual pricing issues there, that has been getting all the headlines. However, I would say that the product governance requirements are bigger and affect virtually all products. So please don't nod off in this session. Next slide, please. So looking at the impact on customers and just why is the FCA doing this? And again, just concentrating on the product governance bits in this webinar. what the FCA is looking at, and value's been a mantra for the FCA for a while now. And then on product governance, what it's looking to achieve is that customers do not receive poor value products or products that do not meet their needs. And obviously we'll be covering that a lot in this session this morning. So next slide, please, Jess. And then the impact on you as firms. Well, I think firms have been given a lot of warning and notice about this through the consultation process. I know I sort of half jokingly said it sneaked in. It was there in the consultation process. But the FCA thinks that firms have been slow to react on this. And quite helpfully for putting together this webinar this morning on only just last month, the FCA sent out a Dear CEO letter and published some research thinking that firms have been slow to comply with the existing rules, let alone the new ones. And in July, some of you may have seen may have been on the receiving end of what the FCA called a preparedness survey, just seeing how ready a sample of insurers, PCWs and brokers were to comply with these new rules. So it is a big regulatory change, but hopefully we can put you on the right track this morning. Next slide, please, Jess. So turning to this August Dear CEO letter now, I hope a number of you received it, as unfortunately the letter did not say who it went to, and it's not yet been put on the FCA website. But I mean, if you haven't got a copy and you want one, then please contact the RWA help desk, and that address is coming up at the end, and we can let you have one. But what its findings were there was from the bullet points. FCA identified a lack of customer centricity in many firms' approaches to product governance, and what that means in plain English then is that the FCA didn't think that firms were putting customers at the heart of their business. Then the second and third bullet points, we also identified that some firms with manufacturing responsibility had taken insufficient steps to meet our existing rules and guidance. And some insurance intermediaries had not understood they were undertaking the role of manufacturer in the distribution chain or the additional requirements. Now, some of the questions coming out from the first webinar we've deliberately delayed to the more relevant sort of webinars, and one of the questions we got is how does these requirements affect wholesale brokers and MGAs? And I think certainly here you can see that MGAs could be seen as being manufacturers. And everyone and looking at the fourth point, some distributors may be receiving remuneration which bears no reasonable relationship to the costs or workload to distribute the product. And then looking at the bold statement, it's that value mantra again from the FCA. This can lead to customers receiving products that do not meet their needs and objectives, or which provide poor overall value. And as I said, this was the FCA looking at the current rules, let alone the new enhanced rules that are going to be enforced in a couple of weeks' time from the start of October. Next slide, please, Jess. So alongside the Dear CEO letter, the FCA had also published what it called a multi-firm review product governance findings. And fortunately, this is up there and available on the FCA website, and they did a sample of I think about 20 firms, and these were the findings. So the first bullet point, an insufficient focus on customers' outcomes and product value, such as the value and oversight of remuneration. So it may be looking at calling out some high commission levels there. That second sub bullet point, looking at product benefits and coverage. It wants firms to look at, value it wants firms to look at, product benefits and coverage when it's considering value, not just be focused on the sales and underwriting performance of products. The second big bullet point there, governance and oversight. Again, that's a very common FCA theme. And so, it found that there were some inappropriate product governance frameworks, to some extent, in some cases, non-existent, or a committee that wasn't really involved in the decision making process. And another question coming out from the first webinar was, what documentation requirements should firms have in this area, and again this documentation of the distribution chain was something that the FCA found perhaps wasn't happening, and what each party's role and responsibility was in that distribution chain. And again, as you'll see from later slides, the distribution chain has been a common theme from the FCA for a number of years now, and that's really looking at everyone who's in the chain, from the customer to the insurer. So starting with the insurer, you could have the insurer, you could have an MGA, you could have a wholesale broker, you could have a retail broker, you could have appointed reps. So I think you can see, and I think the FCA found that in its work, you can get some very long distribution chains with easily 5 or 6 firms involved in that process. So I think it's quite clear or important to document who they are and what it is they're doing, especially as then we'll come on to the value side of this. And then the third bullet point there, the firm's approach to regulatory change, and what the FCA is getting at here is that this is not, product governance is not a new thing. Certainly we've got some new rules in this space, but product governance is not a new thing. I mean, this was flagged with an earlier Dear CEO letter in April 2019, and I think FCA was concerned that perhaps firms hadn't taken the points coming out of that Dear CEO letter on board. So this was a very timely shot across the bows with the new rules coming into force. And then the final point on this slide that the FCA looked at, and obviously the timing and the unfortunate pandemic that we've been in for the last 18 months or so, that COVID-19 tested products as to whether they were still offering value. And I'm pleased to say, and FCA commented here, that fortunately the insurance industry did well on this. All right, not going into the business interruption case today, but just at some personal example here, firms are offering partial refunds. I got £60 back from British Gas because they were unable to sort of service my boiler during lockdown. FCA also complimented firms for allowing customers to amend cover, reduce their wage or turnover declarations mid-term, as obviously they weren't doing as much business as we were in lockdown and staff were being furloughed. So I think this covers, I think you can see this covers a huge range of areas, and we'll go on to those in more detail. We have the next slide, please, Jess. Thank you. So back to that Dear CEO letter, and these were the expectations from the FCA. So I think you can see this as a warning of the direction of travel of where the FCA is going. So where firms do not meet our expectations, we intervene as necessary to ensure they amend products, improve the value, so the V word again, they deliver to customers, including through, and here's the tools open to the FCA, reductions in remuneration, so requiring commission levels to be amended, the provision of additional cover or benefits such that products give more value, ultimately withdrawing products from sale where they are not providing value, and then compensation refunds or redress to customers. And the FCA also got in a good plug for the senior managers and certification regime here, that is making senior managers and individuals at firms accountable for what goes on in those firms. And then the last line on that, or last sentence on that slide, where we see firms and individuals failing to meet their regulatory obligations, we'll act using the full range of regulatory tools available for us. And again, perhaps putting that into more blunt plain English, that is code for enforcement action, possibly off the back of this. So it's a serious topic, and it's one that's certainly at the forefront of the FCA's attention at the moment. Next slide, please, Jess. So just a short history lesson here on product governance, and I suppose perhaps you can see why the FCA is getting a bit fed up with the insurance industry on this. Go back to 2014. We had some add-ons market study, and that culminated in the value measures data, and I'll be saying more about that in later slides. 2018, we had the Insurance Distribution Directive coming into force, and that certainly had things like customers' best interests and the PROD, i.e. the product governance rules, in the handbook at that introduced into the handbook at that time. In 2019, as I said earlier, the FCA has done thematic work on the general insurance distribution chain. Did a Dear CEO letter off the back of it, and published some finalised guidance. And again, thinking about the length of the distribution chain, that covers insurers, MGAs, wholesale brokers, retail brokers, ARs. So as I said, you can easily see how you get into a long distribution chain, and just knowing what everyone's role and responsibility is in that chain is very important. Obviously, 2020, we've had COVID, and the FCA put out the pricing practices consultation paper, which included a section on product governance. And then that was finalised as a policy statement in May this year, which strengthened the existing product governance requirements. And then finally, in the summer, the FCA has proposed a new consumer duty, and this is looking to roll out value across financial services. So, it's not just the insurance industry that's being picked on here, but certainly insurance has been at the forefront of this. And only last week, the FCA and the pensions regulator published a discussion paper looking at value, the V word again, value for money in defined contribution pension schemes. Next slide, please. So what are the new product governance rules? So I think, that, as I say, they've extended them, so now apply to virtually all products, including those still in force and manufactured before the 1st of October 2018, which, history students amongst you will know that was the Insurance Distribution Directive date. It applies to all personal lines products, protection products, premium finance, and this is the one that's perhaps caught people out, commercial risks. So, I think that's a bit of a wake-up call for some commercial lines brokers, with the exception of large risks, which again is a defined term under IDD and Solvency II legislation. But if you're a broker to an SME, then that you are going to be, your products to sell into them are going to be caught by this. So as I say there at the end, so that therefore almost all insurance brokers, and I would include MGAs and wholesale brokers in this, are affected, as there's requirements on both the manufacturers and the distributors of the insurance products in scope. Next slide, please, Jess. So within the new rules, value is going to sound like a broken record here. Value is a big FCA thing, and this is how the FCA has defined it in the PROD rules. So value means the relationship between the overall price to the customer and the quality of the products or services provided. So I think you can see from that definition that it is a judgmental statement. It's qualitative rather than quantitative. And to be honest, the FCA has not wanted to get into a quantitative argument on this, saying commission levels above X means customers are not getting good value. But the FCA does refer back to the Insurance Distribution Directives. Firms should be acting in the customer's best interests. And again, the value measures data that I'll talk about in later slides is going to help determine whether products are or are not offering value. And as I've said earlier, the FCA expects firms to consistently place their customers' interests at the centre of their business. And obviously value plays a big part in that. Good, thank you. So here are some value examples that the FCA has commented on and taken action against, and these will hopefully get you thinking about your own products when you come to review them. So the first one is Express Gifts, and this was a catalogue firm that offered its customers insurance against theft or accidental damage. Now I think the value points on this was that there was very low claims frequency, single figure percentage, and low claims payouts. As most of the products that were bought through Express Gifts were wrapping paper and underwear. But joking aside on that led to customers of Express Gifts and other catalogue firms selling similar products paying tens of millions of pounds of redress to their customers. The second one is Carphone Warehouse, which was a £30 million enforcement fine, obviously on mobile phone insurance, where Carphone Warehouse were not checking whether the customer was already covered. So, duplication of products, is this a product that met their needs? And they were basically selling on cancellation. Well, take it anyway, and you can always cancel it. And I think, the learning point, or one of the learning points for you on that is that, if you've got products that have got high cancellation rates, is that an indicator that something's not quite right, that those products are perhaps not providing value to the customers? The third one, Liberty Mutual, again in the mobile phone insurance space and an enforcement fine. This was where their outsourced claims provider or claims handler was putting up barriers to claiming and complaining. So the value is also about services and things offered to customers. I mean, basically that firm was coming from a starting point that all customers are fraudsters, and working back from there. So I think you can see how some customers were put off putting through their valid claims. So I think you can see there where those customers were not getting value from that insurance cover that they had purchased. A more recent one that the FCA called out recently in the life insurers portfolio letter was over 50s life cover. And as I say, protection products are caught by these new rules as well. And the issue there is that some people will pay in more than in premiums than they can ever hope to get back in claims. That they'll pay in more in premiums than what the sum assured is. So I think that again, I think you can see as well, those customers are getting poor value. The FCA has also called out buildings insurance for leasehold properties, and the point here is that the customer may be wider than just the property managing agent. And again, if you're looking down the distribution chain, if you need to consider the customer as being the tenant of the block of flats that's being insured, then if you have to take them into account in are they getting value from that product, then that might put an end to some of the deals perhaps that you see with some property managing agents getting in terms of high commission levels. In fact, that they're not really that worried about what the premium is because they're getting commission on it and they just pass it on to the tenant. If you're looking at it from the tenant's point of view, I think you can see that product might not offer value to them. And then finally, as we've discussed already, with COVID-19, exclusions and changed circumstances, looking at do products still offer value. So hopefully, that's sort of 6 examples there, and that pulls out some of the value points that the FCA is looking to address. So turning now to the product manufacturer and the handbook definition, and this hasn't changed. This has always been in place since the prod rules came into being. So the handbook definition of a manufacturer is someone creating, developing, designing and or underwriting a contract of insurance. And so it's important to establish who the manufacturer is in a distribution chain, because there's more requirements on the manufacturer. Now, usually it's the insurer, but often you can have co-manufacturers. Certainly where there's MGAs, they might be meeting that definition of creating, developing, designing or underwriting a contract of insurance, and in some cases it's a broker. And obviously it's important that all parties work together, that is documented, because FCA is going to look at these things. It's not going to look good if the FCA comes in and there's arguments over between the various parties over who the manufacturer is and no one's taking responsibility. I think it's quite hard to come back from that poor start, as it were, and that needs to be completed for each product. And I think you need as I said earlier in the recent findings, you need to have a robust product governance framework to just manage and control this. So can I have the next slide, please, Jess? So what are you looking for under product governance? Well, I think as a manufacturer, you should consider the product design, the target market. Who is it intended for? Who isn't? Perhaps more importantly, who isn't it intended for? What are the nature of the cover and the exclusions? And then importantly here about looking down that distribution chain, what are the distribution arrangements, including remuneration? What is the difference between the risk price set by the insurer and the price paid, the end price paid by the customer? And the bigger that gap, the more questions about, well, what are those, putting it bluntly, what are those people in that distribution chain between the customer and the insurer doing for the money that they are getting for providing those services? And then obviously the types of customer are also important, and especially if you've got any vulnerable customers, or if this product is intended for vulnerable customers. I mean, vulnerable customers is another FCA hot topic, and that could be a whole webinar in its own right. But we're not going to touch on that today. And then are there any particularly notable product features? Any unusual exclusions that firms distributing that product and or customers should be aware of? But again, ultimately, as I've been saying, value is a qualitative thing, and it's does the product provide fair value to the customers? I mean, and I think perhaps to try and help you in determining or deciding this, perhaps a good rule of thumb or rough test is would you be happy selling this product to your mother? Or as someone else pointed out to me recently, would you be happy selling this product to someone who works for the FCA? Because, believe it or not, they are human as well. They are customers. They buy insurance products. Next slide, please, Jess. So then turning to the product distributor, and again, giving you the handbook definition, and this is not new, but the product distributor, someone who is advising on or proposing a contract of insurance to a customer. So I think you can see that that's a very broad definition, and is probably going to catch most of you on this webinar this morning. And one of the questions coming out from the first webinar, and I've seen this elsewhere. Or in fact, let's do the first bullet point. So first, and then I'll come on to that. So what should the product distributors be doing? Well, to some extent, they are quite dependent on the manufacturer. They need to receive that information that we were talking about on previous slides, from the manufacturer on that value assessment. Now, some of the questions we received from the first webinar, and I said I've seen it elsewhere, that brokers have not been getting much from insurers on this today. Insurers have not been engaging, and I'm sure that's not the case with Ecclesiastical, and Adrian might like to comment on that at the end. And I think that is true. Certainly seen that worryingly, I was aware of a firm sending a letter to an insurer asking about this, and the insurer came back and said, don't worry, these new rules don't apply to us, as we don't write motor and home insurance. Again, perhaps they ought to come on this webinar and show, though, actually it is relevant for you as well. But my colleagues at RWA have drafted a letter for brokers to send to insurers or manufacturers, reminding them of their responsibilities. If you'd like a copy of that letter to use for your own purposes, then contact the RWA help desk. The address is on a later slide. So, apart from that, though, distributors are not completely off the hook. And that second bullet point is, distributors need to consider that the distribution arrangements, including any remuneration it or another person in the distribution chain, again, wholesale brokers, MGAs, to which it belongs, receives, has on the overall value, the V word again, of the insurance product to the customer. So again, I think you can see there why all the parties need to work together and cooperate on this. And then also, if you're a broker putting together a package of different products from different underwriters, including add-ons and premium finance, then you as the broker have requirements to ensure that the overall package provides value to the customer. Can we have the next slide then, please, Jess? Sorry, back one. Yeah, product reviews. Thank you. So something that the new rules is come in is that firm products need to be reviewed. So all products that are in scope need to be reviewed, and then at least every 12 months or more frequent if risks are identified that the product is not delivering fair value. And some questions that came out of the first webinar: do product reviews need to be done by distributors? The answer is yes. And then that led to a very good follow-on question. Do we have to do this for every product that we can access from every insurer, because we might have thousands of products? And the short answer to that one is yes, but there is some better news there, in the sense that you can aggregate types of product together. So if you're on you would do that panel for a certain product in one go, with the caveat that there's not any unusual exclusions of one type of product, or the commission levels are fairly similar across that range. And and the FCA has acknowledged that, and you can aggregate together where there, in their words, sufficient granular target market and customers sharing common characteristics. But in that recent review, the FCA called out travel insurance. You couldn't do that as one block, especially where you were offering, because there's different characteristics between single trip cover and an annual policy, for example. And it also, called out some SME package products on the point that often they have very broad target markets, and so asking the question, does it provide fair value for all potential buyers within the cohort? But I think generally, you could do your product reviews as a distributor for a range of similar products from different insurers. But as I said, you think we can all see that, why do we choose this product? This is the one that gives us the highest commission, is not really putting customers at the heart of your business. And that's really, with these product reviews, what you are trying to do, considering the product value, ensuring that, the V word again, does value still remain? And, FCA introduced a sort of concept as well. You're looking at this for what they're calling a reasonably foreseeable period, which, in some cases might be beyond the next renewal. And the example that they gave there was protection products, with perhaps inflation decreasing the sum assured over time. That perhaps should be something that you're taking into account when you're doing your product reviews. In the sub-bullet points there, they also highlighted products where benefits might reduce over time. And the example that they gave there was extended warranties, such as the value of value of those electrical goods may decrease over the period of the warranty. Is that still offering value? And then another point, nature of cover and the likelihood of claims changes over time. And what they were getting at here, or the example that they gave here, was lifetime pet insurance, where as the pet gets older, some insurers or some products have introduced a co-insurance requirement that the customer has to pay a certain percentage of claims alongside the insurer. So they are features that should be taken into account when you're doing your product reviews. Next slide, please, Jess. So I think, as I said earlier, premium finance, and certainly I said it on the first webinar, premium finance is in the FCA's sights here, and is also caught by the value rules. And in fact, the FCA's commented, where a firm arranges, retail, and that is a difference between sort of retail and commercial, premium finance as part of its insurance distribution activities, it must ensure its remuneration for this, including any associated incentives such as overriders, is consistent with the firm's obligations under the ICOB's rules, to act honestly, fairly, professionally in their customers' best interest. So, FCA in this has put a lot of onus, on the firms to this to determine what is and what isn't providing value. But underpinning it is the FCA's reliance on the customer's best interest rules. Now, benchmarking can help, benchmarking rates, but it's not conclusive in determining value. I suppose the comment here, just because everyone else is doing it doesn't necessarily mean it's right. And so I think what firms should be doing is comparing that with other financing alternatives. If the insurer is offering a interest-free option and things, you have some questions to ask, why am I recommending premium finance then? And I think the premium finance providers need to help you as brokers on this as well, and in that value equation, well, what is it on the services side? Is there some ease of having all that financing in premium financing in one place from a customer's point of view that gives some benefits? But the FCA does think that the main driver of value in premium finance is the APR rate that is being charged to customers. So I think obviously something to consider. Next slide, please. So what management information should you be looking at to help you with the product governance requirements? I think firstly, I think you should perhaps compile a plan to review all your products over the next 12 months, or at least every 12 months. And then probably it's not a very good plan to say, well, we're going to review everything on the 29th of September 2022 to meet the 30th of September 20 to meet the deadline the day after. I think you're going to need to spread this over a year, and you're probably going to need to have your plans in force very, very soon as to when you're planning to review the products. And then here's some of the, if you like, the underlying management information that you could use to help you make that review. So value measures, as I said, this has been around for a while now, but we are now live, if you like, in the value measures regime. FCA was testing it on a sample of products for a number of years, has now rolled it out to all retail products. The first set of value measures data will be published in the first half of next year, and that is going back for information obtained from the last 6 months of 2021. And so you will be able to see by insurer, by product, retail products, the claims frequency, the claims acceptance rate, and the average claim payout. So that is going to give you some information to benchmark against products offering value. Likewise, claims data, as I said, Express gifts, they weren't getting many claims. Customer feedback or feedback from others and staff and others in the distribution chain, that would be useful if everyone embed it into your organization. If everyone's looking out for value, looking out for the customer, putting them at the heart of their business, that on other, that gives you probably a big tick with the FCA on other matters, such as the underlying culture at your firm and things. Complaints data and FOS data, again, that is available. You could be using high complaints, high FOS overturns. Again, could be an indicator of poor value. As I said, in the car phone warehouse case, cancellations might be an indicator of the product not providing value, or not customers misunderstanding what it is intended for. And then, again, for the distributors, looking at the requirements on them, well, what commissions are you receiving compared to your underlying costs of providing that business? Now, in my experience, and I was at Willis before I was at the FCA, brokers don't have it at that granular detail, but I think you can make some overall comparisons on that. And again, looking at the market or competitor analysis or other publications, from the FCA, but that market and competitor analysis probably not sufficient in its own right. Again, that everyone else is doing it. Defence just won't wash. But I think as I've been saying earlier on this webinar, at the end of the day, it is judgmental, and it's not going to be one of the above, but a combination. And I think, again, to sort of help you in this space, I mean, coming at it from a mindset, you might want to complete this tiebreaker sentence, as it were. This product offers value to the customer because ... and you complete that. And again, as a distributor, my role in the distribution chain and the remuneration that I receive, still offers value to the customer because ... So I think, there's not one right answer to this. And as I said, the FCA has put the onus onto the firms to document and demonstrate that their products and their role in the distribution chain are still mean that the customer is getting value. Next slide, please. So what else should you be doing? I think, as I said earlier, plan on this. And the points in this slide helpfully came from the FCA's a question in the FCA's preparedness survey. And this was, tick the ones that you have done. So have you performed a gap analysis, with the rules and requirements to understand the key steps the firms must take to comply? Have you identified impacted functions and key stakeholders within the firm? Have you developed a project plan to support implementation by 1st of October 2021? So that's not long now. So again, documentation is important here. Have you engaged with the board or equivalent about new requirements and their implementation? And then the last one, I would say, is not a good answer. Not undertaken any of the above steps so far. Obviously, this may be a big piece of work if you haven't sort of started already, and obviously something that RWA can help you with. Next slide, please. So don't want you all going away doom and gloom from the webinar this morning. I think we've covered a lot in 40 minutes or so, and there is totally get it. And, I work for firms as well, that there is a lot to do. But having said that, I think, it is judgmental. It is down to you. I think I would say, most of you already know whether your products offer value or not to the customer and why. And it's more a case of perhaps, documenting that and putting that into some sort of formal process. As I said, there's the address for the RWA help desk at rwagroup.co.uk. If you want a copy of the Dear CEO letter that came out from the FCA in August, or a letter that my colleagues at RWA have drafted to send to insurers, or obviously help with implementing the rules.